In this tutorial, we are going to build a Node Express API from scratch and then connect it to a database as well. And this is the second video in a 3-part series of our MERN Stack Blog application that we are creating. In the first video, we designed the app, okay, using React. Now is the time to create the API, and then in the next video, we are going to connect the API to our React application. So without wasting any time, let me briefly walk you through the project. That's the completed project, a demo of it, and then we'll proceed to create our API using nodejs express and then connect it to our MongoDB database. If you already watched the first video, then you probably don't need to rewatch this demo. You can of course jump straight into the application or the API. But for the sake of the newcomers or those who are not familiar with the project, this is the homepage of the project, and these are posts that our authors or the users of the website have created. Of course, if you come and you want to create a post, you have to sign up and then sign in, right? But we are going to explore that later on in a minute. So these are posts, okay? Every post has a thumbnail, a title, a body, the author, and then a category the post belongs to. As you can see, that's the structure for every post. You can click on the title to read more about the post. So you click the title, it brings you to the single page or the single post page for you to read more about that post. All right. And we can click on the author to see more posts that belongs to that author. So we have Nanado with 3 posts. We can click on Ajia Bintu with 2 posts. We can also click here on the title to read more. I'm going to exit full screen here. And it goes on like that. Okay. Also, we can click on the category to see all posts that belongs to that category, right? So we have for the education category, we have one by Nanado, we have Dramani, and then we have Ernest. They all have posts that belongs to the education category. You can click on business, and we have 2 posts there. And down here on the footer, we can also click the categories here to see all the posts in that category, right? And when the category doesn't have any posts, we get this message, which is cool. So that's all for the home page, I think. And even here, you can still click on the author to see the post that belongs to the author, which is really cool. All right, now let's go to the authors page. And of course, we have all the authors or the users registered to the application. And Jendo has no posts. That's why we have this message. John Doe has only 1 post. And there's the post. We have Dramani with only 1 post as well. We have Nanado with 3 posts. So these are all the posts that belongs to Nanado. All right, so that's it. Now let's try and then sign up, okay, as a new user. So the name of this user is going to be Diana IE. The email, I'm just going to do Diana@gmail. The password is going to be Diana123, Diana123. Okay, if I make any mistake here, for instance, if I add another 3 to the confirmed password, let's see what happens. Passwords do not match, right? If I showed, let me open this in a new tab real quick. That's for the authors. You can see that Jane Doe has an email of jane@gmail.com. Okay, so if you try to register jane@gmail.com, which already exists, okay, let's make sure this password actually is corrected. We hit it and then we get email already exists. Okay, now even if the password is still incorrect, let's see, we still get email already exists because it checks this first. And we are going to integrate or implement these checks by ourselves. Okay, we are not going to use any third-party package or anything like that. We are going to do everything by ourselves. All right, now I'm going to make sure the password is correct or the passwords do match, and the email is going to be Diana, so Diana@gmail.com, right? And now let's register, and we are signed up. Okay, we've been able to sign up. Of course, we are redirected here to sign in, so Diana@gmail.com. Here too, I have some checks. So this password is incorrect. I get invalid credentials. I should make sure it is correct. So Dyna123, we hit login and then we are signed in. Beautiful. So now when we come to authors, we should have Dyna IE with no avatar. Okay. So to create an avatar or to upload a user profile, you can just hit this, and I have some images here that I'm going to use. So for Dyna, I'm going to use this and then hit this check, and boom, we have it. Okay, so now we come back to authors, we have Dyna IE with the avatar. Okay, we can even change it again, right? So if I showed you this person with a nose mask, I hit it again, come back, I have it. Okay, but of course right now Dyna IE has 0 posts. Okay, when we come here, we don't have any post by Dyna IE. So let's go ahead and then create one post. And even here, we can click here and then we can see that Dyna doesn't have any post, right? Now let's go ahead and then create a new post. I'm going to go to Lorem Ipsum. This website is just going to give me some dummy text. That's going to be the body or the description. I call it description, but of course it should be body. Okay, I'm going to select the category. I'm going to choose agriculture. And if I try to create this without a thumbnail, let's see what happens. Fill in all fields and choose a thumbnail. Even if I remove the title and then choose a thumbnail, let's see, this is going to be my thumbnail. If I try to submit, I get the same message. Okay, so we have to make sure everything is perfect before we create. And now we should have a post. Okay, so if I come back here to my posts, I have one post. If I go to authors, then I has one post now. You can click it to see it. You can even click it to read more about the post. We can edit the post, okay, because we are the creator. And if I go back home and click any other post that doesn't belong to me, I'm not going to see those buttons, okay, because I'm not the creator of those posts, right? But for my post, which is this, I can go ahead and then edit or delete. Now let's go ahead and then edit this. Let's say this post has been edited, right? So of course I have to choose or select a category again. You can select a different category. And here I can decide to not upload a new thumbnail. Okay, I can decide to keep the old thumbnail. In that case, I can update with the changes that I have, and boom, I have it with the old thumbnail. Or I can go ahead and then actually choose a new thumbnail. Okay, now I'm going to change this to education, and I can make changes however I want. Go ahead and then choose a new thumbnail. I'm going to use this, and now let's try and then update this post, and boom, we have a new thumbnail for our post, right? The title also changed, as you can see, and all that, the category as well. Okay, so that's basically it, guys. Let's come back here, and we can also delete, right? So just like here that we can delete, we can also delete from here as well. We can edit, delete, and all that, right? So if I try and then delete this, boom, it should be gone. You have no post. If I come to the home page now, I have no post. If I come to the authors, Dyna IE has no post. So that's it. All right, now one thing I want to do is to change the details. But even before that, I'm going to create another post. Okay, I'm going to create a post one more time. Select this, come back, paste. I'm going to use this for the title. I'm going to leave it at uncategorized. I'm going to set the thumbnail to, I think that's cool, and I hit create. So now we have a post, and I'm going to try and then change the thumbnail once more. Okay, I'm going to change the avatar one more time, upload it, come back, and now I should have the new avatar. Okay, Of course, I have one post, and what I want to do is to change my details while I have posts on there, right? I can do it without having posts. I can do it if I have posts as well. I'm going to change the name to Mensa, so Diana Mensa. And if I try to change the email to an already existing email, let's see what happens. So I have an email for Ernest Achiever, and the email is achiever@gmail.com, which already exists, as I just said. And for our current password, that was Diana123. And for our new password, I'm going to say Diana12345. Diana12345. Now let's see what happens. Remember, this is someone's email. This email already exists. Okay, so let's try and then update. We get email already exists, right? This email is someone's email. If I go to authors, that's the email of Ernest Achiever, this person. Okay, right. Now, if I try to change this to Mensa, which doesn't exist, okay, so this should work. And of course, the password, the current password is all right, and everything should be okay right now. If I update, and now I need to enter the new credentials. If I try to log in with the old credentials, that's diana@gmail.com. The password was Diana123. If I try to log in with the old credential, it shouldn't work, right? Now the new one is mensa@gmail.com, and the password is Diana12345, right? Log in. I should be logged in. If I check my name, that's the author name, is Diana Mensa, and everything is looking just perfect. Okay, I can go ahead and then change it back to the previous. Now the password is going to be Diana. That's the current password was Diana12345, and the new password I'm going to change it to the first one that we used. That's Diana123. Okay, and of course the email I'm going to change it to Diana@gmail.com. I hit update. I get logged out again, and I have to enter the credentials one more time. Diana@gmail.com. Diana123. Okay, so I think basically that's it. Okay, this is what we are going to create in this application, and we have a lot to do, so let's dive right in. You need to have a few things installed before you can follow along in this project. Of course, the first thing is VS Code. Also, you need nodejs. There's a Node Express API, so you have to install Node. Any of these, that's the long-term support or the current version, should be all right. Also, you need a MongoDB account and a cluster as well. So you go to MongoDB and then you create an account, you create a cluster as well, and then it should be all set because you are going to be saving everything to a database. Okay. Now, last but not least, you need Postman, and this is what we are going to use to test our API, right? So we are going to use Postman to be testing the API, and then when everything is done, we are going to connect it to our React frontend. Okay, now this is my base project. This is the MERN blog, and as you can see, we have our client, which is the React application, and I'm going to create a server folder next to it. Now let's open the base project, change directory into our server. Right now, I'm going to do npm init and then -y. Okay, so we should have packet.json file in our server directory. Okay, now let's install some very important packages for our API or for this project. First, we are going to install Express. So npm install Express, mongoose, we install course and then .env. And these are the packages that we need for now. Okay, the other packages, there are more packages that we are going to install, but I'm going to install them when the need arises. So now let's wait while these packages get installed, and when it's done we should have a dependencies object in our package.json. Perfect. So everything is said. We have course.env, express, and mongoose. Nice. Okay. Now let's go ahead and then create a very simple express server. I'm going to create index.js, and let's bring in the package that we just installed. First one is going to be express. We require express. Let's bring in course. We require course. And for mongoose, I'm not going to bring in the whole mongoose package. I'm actually going to need only connect. This is what we are going to use to connect to our database, our MongoDB database. So that's going to come from mongoose. And lastly, our .env. For that, I'm going to do require.env and have the config method initialized on that. Now we should initialize our express. So I'm going to do app express and we initialize that. And here I can do app.listen. The port is going to be 5000. And when we are connected, I'm going to have a message in our console. Server running on port 5000. Alright, so we should have a script in our packet.json right here. I'm going to do dev and they should be node. Actually, you know what? I'm going to clear this and let's install a development dependency. Okay, so npm install -d nodemon. Alright, that is done. And now can do nodemon index.js. So we save this. I should have a comma, of course. So now let's do npm run dev and see what we get. We get server running on port 5000. Okay, so our server is ready, and now we can actually start working on our project. I want to connect to our database right now so that we don't have to worry about it. Okay, so here on MongoDB, you can go ahead and then create a new account. I have an account, so I'm just going to sign in. Once you create the account, you should go ahead and then create a new cluster. And right here, database access, you should go ahead and then I'm going to delete this user. You should go ahead and then create a new database user, Igator. For the password, I'm going to auto-generate it. I'm going to copy that to my clipboard. For the rows, read and write, I'm going to restrict to this cluster. And that's it. I'm going to create the user. Now head to network access and then create a new network. I'm going to allow access from anywhere, but you can go ahead and then add your current IP address. Okay, don't do this. It's not safe. Even this. All right, so let's go ahead and then create a new access and we should be set. It's taking too long. Okay, so that's done. Now come to database right here and hit connect. Okay, it will be next to your cluster. You're going to click on connect drivers and copy this link up to here. Okay, that's right before the question mark. Copy that link. We don't need the whole link, we only need it up to the /. Okay, and right after the /, we're going to add the name of our database. And once we have our model and the connection is done, that's the API connects to our database, the database that we named here should be created together with the collections. Okay, so I'm going to copy from here, that's including the /, and come back to my project. I'm going to create a .env. I'm going to call this Mongo URI. The name of our database should be at the end. I'm going to call this MERN Blog Tutorial. this should be the name of your user, the user that you created. The password should be here. So go ahead and then oh, where did I paste the password? I'm going to get the password again. Or just generate, copy, and then update. Perfect. There's going to be the password. And that's it. Okay, so right here, I'm going to do connect, which is the method that we got from our mongoose. So to get this link, we are going to do process.env.mongo URI. If you're able to connect to our database, then we can go ahead and then start our server right here. And instead of hard coding the port, I'm actually going to have it as an environment variable here, and that's going to be 5000. Okay, so server started on port process.env.port. But if anything goes wrong, we should have a catch, and that's just going to log the error in our console. As you can see, server running on port 5000, meaning everything is working smoothly. Our database is connected successfully as well. And when we come to MongoDB, go to database and then browse collection. We won't see anything right now because we don't have any model, okay, for our database collections, right? So for now we won't see it, but once we have a model for our users and our posts, we should have everything in here. Okay, so we should have the database, which is MERN block tutorial. That's the name of our database, right? So that would show here. Then we have our collections inside of it. Okay, but for now, let's go ahead and then proceed. Okay, I'm going to create a folder called uploads. This is where all the files that we are going to upload to the server is going to be. And for now, let me have the basic structure of application down. Right here, I'm going to do app.use express.json and passing extended to be true. I'm going to do app.use express URL encoded. I'm going to have extended set to true here as well. I'm going to do app.use passing calls. The credentials are going to be true, and the origin is going to be the URL of our front end, which is going to be localhost 3000. But of course, for the testing, we are going to use Postman, so we won't actually need this, but let me have it here. It's going to be http localhost 3000. All right, now let's have our routes. Okay, so our first route is going to be the user's route, and let's do app.use, and every path that starts with API users should direct us to the user route file, which we are going to create in a minute. I'm going to have another one here, and that's going to be posts, and this is going to be post routes. Okay, so let's create these routes right now. I'm going to have user routes.js and post route.js. Okay, so for the user routes, I'm going to import router from Express, and I'm going to initialize our router that we just imported. The first route, this is going to be just for test. So I'm going to have a get route here and just have a very simple function in here. So we have our requests and then a response, and maybe next as well. This is the user route, right? Of course, we should make sure that is exported. So module export router. Perfect. For the post route, we are going to do something very similar. So I'll just copy and then paste this. We have a get route. So this is going to be the post route. And of course, we should make sure these files are imported. So let's import user route. So let's go into our routes and then user route. I'm going to duplicate this. There's going to be post route. Inside our routes, we get post routes. And we are going to use Postman to test these routes out. So go ahead and then install Postman, okay? But I already have it and I'm signed in, so I'll just go ahead, click this, and then test this real quick. Let's have local host port 5000 API users, and let's see what we get. We hit it and do I have an error? Let's see. Let's see the error. Post routes is not defined. Oh, post routes. Okay, so we save that, come back to our project, come back to Postman, and then we try this again. And now we have, this is the user route. Okay, if you go to the post route, we get this, the post route. So our routes are working. Our routes are working. Okay, so now let's go ahead and then inside our routes, of course, we are not going to have all the logic in here. So we are going to create a controller folder or controllers folder and have all the controllers in here. And then we are going to import them inside of our route to make things very, very simple. Actually, I'm going to create a middleware folder here as well. And lastly, I'm going to create our models folder. Okay, so this is the structure, and let's go ahead and then create all the controllers for our users setting the post as well. Now let's go ahead and then create our first controller file. There's going to be user controllers.js, and our first controller is going to be the one to register a user. Okay, so const register user, going to be a function request response, and then next. You don't need the next here, but I'm just going to have it in case you need it. All right, so here I'm just going to send a very simple response just so we know what this is. Right, so this is going to be for the register user, and I'm going to have a comment here. There's going to be a post request. That's when we get to the routes. Okay, there's going to be a post request, and the path, and this is going to be unprotected. The route is going to be unprotected, and the rest of the controllers are going to be very simple. So I'm just going to copy and paste. The second one is going to be for the login. I'm going to say login a registered user. The path is going to be API users and then login. It's going to be unprotected as well. We are going to say login user, and the next one is going to be a path to our user profile. So I'm just going to say user profile. The path is going to be users, and then the ID of that user is going to be protected, and this is going to say get user. We are going to have a controller to change our user avatar. So that will be change user avatar. API users and then change avatar is going to be protected, and this is going to say change avatar. Nice. Now the next controller is going to be the one to edit the user details. The path is going to be API users and then edit user. It's going to be protected, of course, and it's going to say edit user. The next controller is going to be the one to get all the users or all the authors. So you can say get user or get authors, right? I'm going to do get authors, but I think get users would actually make more sense, right? So you can go ahead and then say get users, and it's going to be unprotected. So these are our controllers. We have the register right here. We have login, get user, change avatar, edit user, and then get authors, right? Now we should be able to get them from our routes. So let's export them from here. It's going to be an object, and then we pass in all the controllers that we have in here. Get user, change avatar, edit user, and lastly get authors. Perfect. Right, so we can come back to our routes. Now let's import all the controllers in here, and I'm actually just going to copy this object to make things simpler. So we destructure them from the file. So we require let's go into controllers and then user controllers. Perfect. So now we should have our controllers in here. So the first route that we are going to have is going to be the register route, and as I said, it's going to be a post. It's going to be a post request, and we bring in the controller, which is register user right here. The next route is going to be the login route. That's going to be a post request as well. It's going to be /login. And remember, we have /API/users here already. That takes us to our user route, and then we continue with the rest of the path, and then the controller that should take effect, or that should work on that path, right? So this is going to be the login user controller, and the next route is going to be a get request, and that's going to be / and then ID, and that's going to be the get user route. The next is going to be /, so API/users/ right, and that's going to get all the users or all the authors. It's actually get authors, right? You could make it get users if you want. I said that already. So router post, there's going to be a post request, and that's going to change the avatar. And let's bring in a change avatar controller. So router.patch, that's going to edit our user details. So edit user, edit user, and that's it. These are the routes we need for our users. And we are going to work on the controllers very soon, but before that, I want to have some middlewares before we proceed. Okay, I want to have a 4.4 middleware that is going to handle paths that are not supported, and I'm also going to have an error middleware, and that is going to handle every error that occurs in our application. .js. And here we are going to have the 404 and then the error middleware itself is going to be used to handle the errors. Let's first have a 404 middleware. And I'm just going to say not found. New error. Now it's found. Request original URL, and I'm going to have a status of 404 and then pass it onto the next middleware. So let's go ahead and then create that error middleware. Request, response, next. And since this is an error middleware, we need errors or error. Okay, that's going to be the first parameter in here. Let's first check if a response is already sent. Okay, so header sent. If that is true, then we can go ahead and then return next and then the error. Right. Oh, I don't need this. But if a response hasn't been sent already, then we are going to send one. And the status is going to be the error code or 500. Let's have a JSON, and the message is going to be the error message, or let's have a default message of an unknown error. Okay, now let's export these two middlewares. Not found and error handler. Is that what I named it? And let me call it that. Good. Now I want our error handler to be well structured or well presented. So I'm going to have a very simple model or a constructor function for it. Okay, so in our models folder, let's have error model.js, and let's create a class here. I'm going to call that http error, and that's going to extend our error class. Okay, constructor get message and then error code. We do super and then pass in the message. There's the code, should be equal to the error code. Right, now we should export this. So module.export http error. Beautiful. Okay, so that's all for our error handling and our 404 page. Okay, so we should come to our index.js, and before we connect, we should have these two routes. So app.use, the not found, should make sure that is imported, and I don't think it is. Of course, I can go ahead and import the two error handler as well. We should make sure our server is started, and we have a problem. Require middleware function. This should be a spot. Right, so we come back and let's test this out. All right, so let's hit a route that doesn't exist, and we get not found. Okay, now let me comment this out. That's the not found and the error as well. we could only comment the not found out because that's what is taking effect here, right? And let's try this. We get this, which doesn't really look good. That's why we have to have our own 404 route. Perfect. So now we can proceed. Nice. And of course, we should test all these routes before we even work on the controllers, right? We should make sure these routes are working, right? So let's come back to our Postman. Go to environment. I'm going to have an environment variable in here. I'm going to call this MERN blog, and the variable is going to be base URI. The initial value is going to be HTTP localhost, and the port is 5000/API. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste it in here as well. All right, now let's save this right here and then make this active. So we'll set as active environment. Okay, so now when we come back here, we can go ahead and actually have the different routes. The first one is going to be our register, which is going to be a post request. So we are going to have our base URI. So that's localhost/API and then /users/register, right? So we check and we have it's not a function. Interesting. You know what? Let's see. It's a post register. And for the register user, we have register user as the response. Oh, JSON. Interesting. I'm going to have all of these Johns and make them JSON. My bad. So now we should have register user, okay, as a response. So I can go ahead and then save this route. So I'm going to save this as, let me create a collection for this. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to rename this to be register user. Okay, let's save. Yeah, so we have our register user. I'm going to close the environment variable, and the next is going to be the login user. Okay, so we have the base URL/users/login. That's the path, and it's also a post request. That's if you come to route. Okay, the login route is a post request. All right, so we send this request and then we get login user. Right, so that controller is also taking effect. I'm going to call this login user and then save in our MERN block collection. The next route is going to be get user. Okay, so that's a get request. Let's have a base URI/users/ and then an ID. Okay, so the ID can be any value, and we hit it, we get user profile. That is the get user. That's what we returned in the controller, if you can remember, right here, user profile. Perfect. Now on the next one, let me actually save this as well. Okay, now the next one is going to be get authors or get users. So let's quickly do that as well. It's going to be a get request, the base URI, users, and that's it. Right, so we do it, we send a request and then we get all the users. I'm going to save this, get users or authors, and we save. And I think this is going to be the last one. No, last but one. So we have change avatar, and that's a post request. So our base URI, change the method to post. So we have users slash change avatar. We hit it, and then we get change user avatar. Let's save this. And now the last route is going to be edit user, and that's a patch request. So patch base URI users and then edit user. I think we send this request and then we get it, edit user details, right? So our routes are working, okay, and our controllers are taking effect. It's now time to actually have the logic to register, login, and all that. I'm going to have some space, and actually, since you are going to be communicating with the database, all these functions are going to be asynchronous. Okay, so let me have a sync on all of them. And actually have enough space between them so that the difference are obvious. Okay, let me have some space at the top as well. Before we come back, we're going to go ahead and then create a model for our user. Okay, so let's bring in schema and model from mongoose. Let's first have our schema. So user schema is going to be equal to new schema and then pass in an object. First we need a name, of course, and the type is going to be string and it's going to be required. We also need an email. It's going to be a string as well and required. Come on. We need a password for every user. The type is going to be string and it's also going to be required. We also need an avatar. The type is going to be string and it's actually not going to be required. Okay, so that's enough. Now lastly, we are going to have posts. That's the post count of every user. The type is going to be number and the default is going to be 0. All right, so that's our schema. Let's create the model and export it. Let's do that directly. So we are going to say model and the name of the model is going to be user and we are going to use the user schema that we just created, and that's it. All right, now so we are going to use this model in our controller to actually be able to create users. I'm going to have everything inside a try catch block, and if you are trying to register a user and we have any errors, we are just going to pass it on to the error middleware right here. Okay, and that will take care of it. Okay, so if you have any error, we are going to return next and say new HTTP error, which is coming from our error model, and it takes in a message. We're going to say user registration failed and a code, an error code, and it's going to be 422, and this means the user input wasn't correct. Okay, so there could be empty fields that was sent, and in here is where we are going to have the actual logic. First, we need some things from the user. We need a name, an email, password, and then confirm password, which is password 2. If you watched the React, then you should remember this, and that's going to come from the request body. Okay, so once we have that, we should make sure these fields are not empty. Okay, so the name, we should make sure that it's not empty, the email, and the password. We shouldn't worry about the confirm password right now because we are going to make sure these two match anyway. So if these are empty, then we are going to return another error. So return next, new HTTP error. The message is going to be fail in all fails. And we are going to be able to actually extract these messages and then show it to the user for them to know what is actually going on behind the scenes, right? But if they pass, that means if all the fields were entered, then we are going to go ahead and then change the email to be lowercase. I don't want there to be a situation where you would enter all caps email and then it wouldn't be correct or it wouldn't log you in. Okay, so I'm going to make sure every email that comes in is converted to lowercase before we actually proceed with any other checks. Right, so once we have the email converted to lowercase, let's check if the user already exists. Okay, so I'm going to have a constant here and say email exists, and this is going to be an asynchronous request, so I wait. Let's bring in our user model, and that's going to come from our models, user model. Perfect. All right, so user dot find one. And while we are doing this, when we come to our MongoDB, you should know that now it is connected, okay, because we are trying to communicate with the database. So now we have the database already created for us. So if the email exists or the user exists, then we can proceed, right? We're just going to send an error message. We say email already exists, and that's going to be 422. Right, now if they pass or if the email is brand new, then we are going to go ahead and then check the password, right? And the first check is going to be the length of the password. So first I'm going to go ahead and then trim the password, and after that I'll check the length of it and make sure it is more than 6 characters. So if it is less than 6 characters, I'm going to return an error. So new HTTP error, and you're going to say password should be at least 6 characters, and that's going to be 422 as well. Once we pass this check or the password is more than 6 characters, then we can go ahead and actually make sure the password and the confirmed passwords match, right? So if the password does not match the confirmed password, which is the password 2, then we should return an error, new HTTP error, and say passwords do not match 422. If everything is set, that's if the password also match, that's the password and the confirmed passwords also match, then we can go ahead and then hash our password. Okay, but to hash the password, we are going to install a package called bcrypt. So let's see it into server. Come on. And let's do npm install bcryptjs. Right, so let's bring that in. Okay, wait a minute. I'll put this up. Right, so let's bring in the bcrypt, the package we just installed. bcryptjs. To hash a password, we first need a salt. Okay, so let's create a salt real quick, and it's going to be asynchronous. So let's have a wait. bcrypt.gen salt, and then it's good. Right, so this like how hard it's going to be, how hard the salt is going to be. Now let's go ahead and hash the password. It's going to be asynchronous as well, and that's going to be bcrypt.hash. We pass in the password that we are trying to hash and then the salt, and that's it. Okay, so now we have the password, the email, the name, and we are good to go. We can proceed to add this user to our database. New user is going to be equal to await, since there is an asynchronous request. So await user dot create, and this user is the model, the user model that we created, right? So user dot create, we have name, email, which is going to be the new email. That's the lowercase, right? We changed it to lowercase. That's what we want. And the password is going to be the hashed password. All right, so we save this, and I'm actually going to send this as a response, at least for now. Okay, so response is going to be, let me have a status of 201, and that means a new resource is added, and the JSON is going to be the new user that we just created. So now let's go ahead and then test this out in our Postman, and that's going to be register user. And for the body, you can choose URL encoded or raw JSON. Okay, because if you come to the index.js, we have, where is it, right here. Okay, so we have JSON and then URL encoded. Okay, so I'm going to use the URL encoded. To register, we need a name, and first we can check to make sure our database is actually empty. Okay, so I'm going to refresh this, and as you can see, there is nothing in our database, and in the user collection there are no documents. Okay, so we have a name of John Doe and email. The email we can do john@gmail.com, and if I send this without the other fields, let's see what happens. We get the fill in all fields error message right here. Fill in all fields, right? Let's proceed, and for the password we can do John, and there's less than 6 characters, so we should have an error message for that as well. But let's proceed and have confirm password. That's password 2, and for that one I'm just going to enter a random string. Let's try and then send this. We get password should be at least 6 characters, and that's coming from this check right here. Okay, now the password here, I'm going to do John123, but as you can see, it doesn't match the confirmed password. So if you try and then send this, we get passwords do not match. Okay, so all these checks are working. All these checks are working exactly as expected. These checks are going to make sure the user isn't registered. Okay, so they should pass all those checks before the user gets registered. So now, if the password is John123, this user should be registered. Okay, so let's try and then send this, and boom, we have it. Okay, and notice our password is also hashed. And if we come back to our database, let's see, we have John Doe already in our database. Right, now since we have John Doe in our database, let's try and then register another user with, or the same user, John Doe. Right, let's try and then see what happens. We get email already exists. Okay, so even if we change this to caps, that's john@gmail.com, and then try and then register, we get email already exists, because we changed the email to lowercase before we actually proceeded to do the checks. Right, so that's it for our registration. And for the response, I'm not going to send this. Instead, I'm going to say new user, and that's going to be the new user email registered. Right, so new user John Doe or john@gmail.com registered. That's the response I'm going to send, instead of sending the new user, which will contain the password and everything. I don't want that. I'll only send this message. All right, so let's try and then register another user. I'm going to register Jane Doe. The email is going to be jane@gmail.com. The password is going to be jane123. The confirm password, of course, is going to be jane123 as well. And I'm going to use caps and even mix it. Right, so everything is correct. We should proceed and then register this user, and we get new user jane@gmail.com registered. Let's check our database real quick. And we have Jane Doe as well. Perfect. All right, so the registration is done, and now we can proceed to log in users. Let's have this inside a try catch block as well. For the catch, it's going to be simple. New HTTP error, login failed. Please check your credentials. Come on. 422 for the status. All right, we first need an email and a password from the request body. And let's make sure the email is not empty, as well as the password. If they are, then we are going to return a new HTTP error, and that's just going to say failing or fails, just like the registration 422 for the status. Right after, we are going to have a new email, which is going to be the lowercase of whatever the client brought, okay, whatever the user entered. We can go ahead and then fetch this user, okay, from the database. Okay, so const user is going to be await, since this is an asynchronous request. Find one. Email is going to be new email. If we have the person, then that means, okay, this user is actually registered. But if we don't have the user, then let's have a new error, new HTTP error, and that's going to say invalid credentials. Right, that means the email is not correct. So if he or she passes, then we can go ahead and compare the password that was entered to the password that came from the database. Let's await bcrypt.compare, passing the password that was entered and compare it to the password that is hashed coming from the database. If they do not match, if the password that was entered doesn't match the password coming from the database, then that means the user entered the wrong password. Okay, so a new HTTP error and say invalid credentials. Now, if they pass everything, then we can go ahead and then send them a token, okay, which is their ticket to log in into the application. So first, let's extract some things from the user. Let's extract the ID. I'm going to call that ID and the name as well, coming from the user that we got from the database. All right, now once we extract this, we can go ahead and then generate a token, and we are going to do that using JSON web token. Okay, so let's go ahead and then install JSON web token. Okay, so that's done. So let's bring in JSON Web Token. Acquire JSON Web Token. Come down here. The token is going to be equal to JWT.sign. It first takes in an object of the payload that we need to add. Okay, I'm going to use the ID and the name as the payload, or you can use even the email, since the email is going to be unique, right? We are making sure the email is unique during registration, so you can use that as well. But I'm going to use the ID that we extracted and the name. Okay, now the next is going to be the secret. The next argument that we need to add is going to be the secret to this token, and I'm going to put that inside of the .env. It's going to be an environment variable, so I'm going to call this JWT secret, and that's going to be any random string. So I'm going to copy this and paste, and I'm going to just add a few more characters, and this is going to be my secret. Since we've edited our JWT, we should go ahead and then restart our server. Perfect. And then come back to our login controller. So here, process.env.jwt secret. And the last is the optional, and the last argument that we will have is expires in, and this is the duration of the token, right? So we have our token, and we can go ahead and then send a response to our user or to our clients. So response, the status is going to be 200. Since everything went well, let's send our token. I'm actually going to send the ID and the name as well. All right, so this is all for our login. Now let's go ahead and then try this out in Postman. Okay, so we don't need the name. We only need, actually, let's go to login, of course. Okay, the body is going to be URL encoded. We only need email. So in this case, we have two users, right? So jane@gmail.com, and the password, for now, I'm going to give us an incorrect password, and let's see what happens. Invalid credentials. Okay, so let's have the actual password, Jane123. That was the password. Let's try and then sign in, and boom, we have it. So we are actually signed in. This is the token that was generated. And if you go to JWT or JSON Web Token website, you can actually see the payload that this token entails. Okay, nice. So I think everything is working. Let's try and then enter an email that doesn't exist as well. We get invalid credentials. Okay, let's try John Doe, who is also a registered user. We get invalid credentials because the password is not correct for John Doe. It should be John123. We send a request, and this is what we get. Okay, so everything is working, guys. That's for the login user. Everything is working. So now we should move on to the next, which is going to be get user. We are going to have this inside the try catch as well. And as usual, I'm just going to, you know what, I'm going to copy this and then paste it and just change the message, or just pass in the error. Okay, this is going to be very simple. Let's extract the ID of the user we are trying to get, right? So that's going to come from the request parameters, so params. And once we have that, we can go ahead and then fetch that user. And we are going to fetch by ID. Now, while fetching the user, we should be careful not to include the password. Okay, so select minus password. And if we don't get the user, then we should return next new HTTP error, user not found 44. If we get the user, then let's have a status of 200 and send a response. Now let's try and then get a user. And to do that, I'm going to come here and then copy an ID here, since we can only use these two users for this demo. Now let's get to get user and pass in. Now if I try to get a user that doesn't exist, I get this error. Okay, this is the error that we passed in, right? And I'm going to pass in a user ID that actually, wait a minute, let me copy that again. I'm going to pass in this ID which exists, and now we get John Doe, which is the ID of the user I copied. Okay, let me copy this one as well, Jane Doe, pass it in, paste, we get Jane Doe, right? So everything is working for get user. Now let's move on to I think the next is going to be get authors, which is going to be very simple as well. It's actually change avatar, but let's work on the get authors first, which is this. Of course, let's return in case of any errors. We are just going to return the error. I'm going to say authors is going to be Uuid user dot find, and we are going to find without the passwords. Okay, we find all the users, but make sure we don't include any password. And as a response, we are going to send the authors or the users that we just got. Very simple. So let's come back to Postman and yeah, get users. Let's see what happens. And we have Jane Doe, we have John Doe and then Jane Doe. Okay, and as you can see, no passwords were added, right? If I should remove this, so we get the passwords, which is not good. Okay, you should never do this. I'm going to come back and yeah. So that's it for get authors. And the next thing is going to be change avatar. Okay, we should be able to change the user's avatar. So that's the controller we are going to work on next. For this too, I'm going to have everything inside a try catch. And for the catch, I'm just going to return next new HTTP error, and then just pass in the error. Now for the actual logic, we should be expecting an image in the request that we are receiving from the client. So for now, for us to see what is happening, I'm going to send that as a response or log that in the console. Let's see what works, right? So request files, whichever works. We are just going to see what is inside the request files, right? So let's come back to Postman and try this out. So change avatar. It's a post request. We have everything set up. Let's go to form data, and here we can actually change the text to file so that we can upload a file. I'm going to choose this avatar 2 and then send this request. Let's see, and we get nothing. Now let's come back and check our console, and we have this. Okay, so okay, for this to work, we have to install a package that's express-fileupload. It's going to make things very easy for us. So let me come here, clear this up, and then npm install express-fileupload. Now the installation is done. Let's go to index.js and bring in express-fileupload. I'm going to call it upload, and let's require express-fileupload. right here I'm going to create a middleware app.use and instantiate the upload, that's the express file upload. And below that I'm going to have app.use, and that's where we are going to have our path to the uploads folder that we created, where our files are going to be saved. So express.static their name plus uploads. Okay, so this way our files or our images are going to be saved right here. Perfect. So with this setup, with this done, with the help of express file upload, let's try this again. I'm going to hit send, and now we have this. Okay, so as you can see, we have undefined. Of course, we didn't give this a name. I'm going to give it a name of avatar. Right, let's send this again, and we get this. Okay, so we have the name of the image that was sent, that was avatar 2, if you can remember. We have all these here which don't really make sense, but let's scroll way down and we can see the size of the image, we can see the MIME type and all that. So we're actually going to check the size of the image before we even upload. And also for the name, you know, people can have the same name for different images, right? So we're actually going to change the name as well before we actually upload it to our server, right? So let's come back to our user controller. I'm going to remove this, and now let's proceed. So the first thing we want to do is to check if the request coming in has the image that we are looking for. So let's check request files avatar to see if we have anything there. If we don't, then we are going to return an error. Next HTTP error, and say please choose an image. The code is going to be 422. If we have an image, then we can proceed and fetch the user from the database. Okay, now this route is protected, if you can remember. So what we are going to do in a minute is actually have an authorization middleware that is going to permit only logged in users to have some privileges. Okay, and with that authorization middleware, we are going to have request.user, and that is going to have an object of the current logged in user. Okay, so with that, we already should have a request.user object, which is going to hold the details, that's the ID, the name, and all that of the current logged in user. And that is what we are going to use right now to fetch the current logged in user, or the user that is trying to change this avatar. Okay, we're going to fetch that user from the database so that we can see whether he already has an avatar in there. Okay, and if he does, we are going to remove that avatar or delete it and then upload the new one that is coming in, if that makes sense. Right, so let's find user from database and let's await since this async, and we are going to find by ID and passing request user ID. Now that we have the user, we are going to delete hold avatar if exists. And to achieve this, I'm going to bring in two modules from Node, that's FS, file system, and also path. They both come with nodejs, so you don't have to install any extra package. Right, so with this, we are going to check if avatar exists in the database. If so, then we are going to delete that avatar. Okay, so let's do fs on link, passing the path. So path.join their name back up into our uploads folder, and then we add the name that we got. Okay, the name of the avatar. Right, now this is going to take in a callback function, and in case there is any error, then we are going to have a message and then return next new HTTP, return next new HTTP error, and then pass in the error that we got. Okay, so that's for our if. That's if we already have an avatar in the database. if the user already has an avatar. Remember, by default, no user has an avatar, right? So if the user does, then that means it's already uploaded one. After this check, we are going to go ahead and then work on the new file or the new avatar coming in. First, let's extract the avatar from the request files and let's check the file size. So if avatar.size, let's check if it is greater than 500 kilobytes. New HTTP error and say profile picture too big, should be less than 500 kilobytes. You can pass in a status of 422, right? But if the file size is okay, then we can go ahead and then change the name of the file that is coming in, right? As I said, some files can have the same name, right? And we don't want that conflict. So what we are going to do is to change the name of every file that is coming in. You know, somebody somewhere can have his or her file named as Ernest or johndoe.jpg, and I can also have my file named the same thing, right? And we don't want those conflicts during deletion or upload. So what I'm going to do is to change every file that is coming in. That's the name of the file that is coming in. I'm going to alter the name and then upload it, right? So first, let's get the file name. That's going to be avatar.name. Remember, we have that. Okay, so right here, we get the name from the avatar object. So once we have the name, we are going to first split it. Okay, so I'm going to say splitted file name is going to be equal to the file name dot split. I'm going to split it by the dot. So for every name using this one, for example, I have avatar2.jpg. This dot separates the name, the actual name, from the extension. Okay, now you could have some files that have multiple dots in it, but still we are going to be able to alter this in such a way that we won't have duplicates or duplicate names, right? So let's let the new file name be equal to the splitted name. So what I'm trying to do is to split the whole thing into two, extract this part, add a random string that is not going to repeat itself, and then I'm going to add the extension on top of it. Okay, right? So to actually have that random string, I'm going to install Uuid. Okay, so let's quickly install Uuid. npm install Uuid. All right, that was fast. We are going to say let new file name be equal to the splitted file name and get the first index or the first element in the array. I'm going to add the, let me bring in Uuid real quick. Go up and then bring in I have to instantiate this, and we'll have our dots and then the extension, which is going to be the last part of the split, right? So let's add the extension. That's the splitted file name, and then we get the splitted file name length -1, and that is always going to give us the last element in the splitted array, if that makes sense. Okay, perfect. Now you could actually do 1 right here so that it always gets the second index, but you know, as I said earlier, some files may have multiple dots, so when you split it, they are going to have more than 2 elements in the array, so it's better to do it this way. So now that we have everything set, we can go ahead and upload the file. All right, so to upload, you're going to say avatar.mv, that is move, and let's get the path.join, the directory name. Let's go up into the uploads and add the new file name that we have. This is going to take in callback function And in case there is any error, we are going to shout that error out. Okay, so let's return next, new HTTP error, and let's pass in the error. Right, so that's all we need here to upload our file. Now, once the upload succeeds, we can go ahead and communicate that to our database. Okay, so updated avatar, that's what I'm going to call it. It's going to be await user.find by ID and update request.user.id, and then avatar is going to be the new file name. Right, now I'm going to add an object here and say new loading sync functions. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to make this an async function right here so that this is how it works. So this new true is going to make sure what we get back is the new updated user. So if everything goes well, or in this case I'm going to say if we have a problem, that's if updated avatar doesn't work, then we are going to return new HTTP error and say 422. All right, but if everything goes well, let's just return the status of 200 and JSON of the updated avatar. Let's see what happens. Okay, all right, now let's come back to here. Let's try this. Yeah, the ID is not going to work because we don't have the authorization done. For us to be able to test this out, we should have our authorization middleware. So right here in middleware, let's have Auth Middleware.js. I'm going to bring in JWT, that's JSON Web Token, and also bring in error model. Request response next, and let's make sure this is exported. All right, here I'm going to first get a token from the request that is coming in. So I'm going to say authorization is going to be request headers authorization, and here we are going to make sure that authorization exists and it also starts with bearer. If so, then we can go ahead and extract that token from the headers, the request headers. Okay, so const token is going to be equal to authorization dot split, and we split by a space because we are going to have bearer. It's going to be like this, bearer, and then the token, right? So we are going to split it by the space and then get this, which is what we want, which is the token that we want. We get the second element, which is the one index. Okay, the first is going to be the bearer, and then the second index is going to be the token itself, if that makes sense. Right now, once we have the token, we have to verify that token. Okay, so JWT.verify, we pass in the token, and then we pass in the secret that we used to encrypt that token. So that is JWT underscore secret. If you can remember, that is in our .env. Now this is going to have a callback function, and if there is any error, we can just return next new HTTP error and say unauthorized invalid token and say 403. Okay, now if we have the token, that is if we pass this check, then we can go ahead and have that request user that I talked about earlier. and that is going to be equal to info, which is this right here, and that is going to be payload that was embedded during the creation of the token or the generation of the token. So once we have that, we can go on to the next middleware. And if we fail, let's have an else here and return next, new HTTP error, no token. Perfect. Okay, so this the auth middleware that we need. So now we can proceed to test our avatar upload out. Okay, but before we do that, let's come to our routes. User routes. Bring in the middleware that we just created. Auth middleware, right? So right here, before the controller to change the avatar, we should have the auth middleware to make sure everything is checked. Okay, before we can proceed to let a user change an avatar, right? So let's come back to Postman and then test this one more time. And authorized no token, yeah, because we haven't signed in. I'm going to sign in. Okay, I actually have a token here, but I'm going to sign in as John Doe here, and then copy this token, come back to change avatar. In the authorization, I'm going to choose bearer token and then paste the token, right? Now let's go ahead and then send the request again. Split is not a function. Okay, we probably have an error in our controller. Oh, split, right? So now let's try this again. We have the token and wow, we have it. Okay, so as you can see, now we have an avatar, which is perfect. And you can see the name as avatar2 and then the unique ID that we added. And we have the extension right at the end. All right, so we are done with the upload of avatar. Now I'm going to have this inside the try catch as well. And if there is any problem, you can go ahead and return next, new HTTP error. I'm just passing the error that we get. And the first thing I want to do is to get all the details from the user. So name, email, current password, the new password, confirm new password. And make sure none of them is empty. Current password. If any of them is empty, we are just going to return next, new HTTP error, and say fill in or fails. Now you can go ahead and get the user that is trying to update his or her details. Let's await user or find by ID, and that's going to be request user ID, if you can remember from the authorization. And if you don't get the user, if you don't find the user, then that means this shouldn't be possible, right? That means the user isn't logged in. So let's return next, new HTTP, and let's just say user not found, and 403, or you can do it 404. Now we should make sure the email doesn't already exist. Okay, so let's make sure new email doesn't already exist. Right, we don't want to change someone else's email, if that makes sense. And of course, if we don't change our email, if you don't update the details together with a new email, we should keep the original one, right? So what I'm going to do is to check that real quick. So email exists, is going to be await user find one, and then pass in the email. And now if the new email exists in our database, then we should make sure it isn't someone else's. Okay, it should be our email. So if the email that exists isn't our email, then that means we are trying to change someone else's email, and that shouldn't be possible. So we are going to return next error, new HTTP error, right? I hope that makes sense. We shouldn't be able to change someone else's email. We should only change our email. Right, so once we have that check, we can go ahead and compare the passwords. Okay, so let's compare current password to database password. We're going to use bcrypt compare, of course, pass in the current password and compare it to the user password, the encrypted user password. If it is not valid, then we have a problem, and we can return next new HTTP error and say invalid current password. That's 422. But if we pass that, then we can go ahead and then compare the new passwords. So compare the new passwords. If the new password is not equal to new confirmed password, oh, should be new confirmed password. They do not match, then we are going to return next new HTTP error, and that's going to be 422 as well. Right, but if the passwords do match, that's the new passwords. If they do match, then we can go ahead and hash one of them. And now we can have the new hash. Await bcrypt dot hash new password and then the salt. Okay, so let's go ahead and then update this user. Say new info is equal to await user dot find by ID and update. That's request user dot ID. The name is going to be the name, email is going to be email, password is going to be the hashed password. That's hash. Is that what I call it? Why did I make it capital? It should just be hash or hashed pass, whatever. Hash new true, so that it returns the newly updated user info. Right, so now we can go ahead and send that response. It's going to be 200 for the status, and then send in new info. Right, so let's try this out real quick, and I hope this makes sense. Okay, so let's go to, oh, I don't have that, so let's create that real quick. All right, so let's have a base URL or base URI, and that's going to be, let's check the routes real quick. User routes, edit user, that's going to be a patch request, right? And we get edit user, and that should pick the current logged in user. So let's go to authorization, bearer token, and then pass in the token. We have a token here, so we can go ahead. Not found. Interesting. Oh yeah, user. Oh, sorry, users. All right, let's hit it. Fill in all fields. Of course, we don't have the form, so let's go to body, form URL encoded. I'm going to have name, and the current logged in user is who? Jendo. Let me log in again. we are going to get a token. I'm going to copy this, come to our patch, and right here, authorization, bearer token. I'm going to paste in the token we just copied. Right, so for the body, of course, if you don't enter anything, let's see what happens. Fill in all fields. For the name, that's Jendo, right? So you are trying to change the details of Jendo. If you come to our database, is what we have. We have Jendo with no avatar or anything. Now remember, we changed the avatar. The first upload that we did, that was during the testing of the avatar. We changed, or we uploaded an avatar for John Doe, right? So he has an avatar, but Jendo doesn't. But let's ignore that for now. We are trying to change the actual details. So for the name, I'm going to do Jendo Do. For the email, jendo1@gmail.com. For the current password, it was, wait a minute, is it current password? Current password, Jane123. The next is going to be the new password. That's going to be JaneDo123. That's for the new password. And the new confirm password, that's going to be JaneDo123. Right now, notice the current password is not correct. So let's try and then send this. We get wait a minute, but I have the ID. What is going on? This should work, but it's not working for some reason. Yeah, of course it's not working because we don't have the middleware, the auth middleware. We don't have that on the route. Okay, it should go through the auth middleware first before we actually hit the controller, the edit user controller. Okay, so let's get back to user routes, and for the edit user we should have auth middleware. Okay, if that makes sense. Right, so do I log in again? I'm going to try and then log in again. Copy the new token given, come back to change user details, and that's going to be the bearer token. I'm going to paste the new token. Right, now let's come back here, and now notice the current password is wrong. So let's send this and see what happens. We get invalid current password. Okay, now let's make sure it is correct, but the new passwords do not match, and let's see what happens. New passwords do not match. Okay, and one more thing, I want to try and then enter an email that already exists. Okay, so in this case, that's going to be John Doe's email. We shouldn't be able to change someone else's email. So john@gmail.com shouldn't work. Let's see what happens. And we get email already exists. Okay, so everything is working exactly as expected. So now we should have jane1@gmail.com. That should be our new email. And then let's hit send. And now, yeah, the new passwords do not match. Passwords, they do match now. So what's going on? Wait a minute. New confirm password. Oh, you know what? It should be new confirm password or confirm new password. You know what? I'll just make it confirm new password. Right. That should make things easier. So here should be confirm new password. Let's go ahead and hit this. And now, as you can see, we've been able to change the details of Jane Doe. If we come to our database and reload this, you can see that Jane Doe is now Jane Doe. The email is Jane Doe1, and that's it. Okay. Of course, we can change it back to the previous. And now it should be jane@gmail.com. The name should be Jendo. And now the passwords here are going to be, and this password is going to be the current password. So I'm going to copy that and then paste it. And the new password is going to be Jendo. Okay. I hope you are following along. So now let's send this and it should work. Okay, so now we have the old details. Of course, with Jendo logged in, we can go ahead and then upload an avatar for Jendo as well. So change avatar. Let's come here and let's come back, copy the token for Jendo authorization. I'm going to paste in Jendo's token. Come on, I'm going to copy it one more time, paste it, and let's see, body, file. I'm going to choose this. That's avatar 10 for Jendo. Let's say send and see what we get. Okay, so Jendo should now have an avatar. Let's come back to our database, refresh, and now we have an avatar for Jendo. If we check our files, you can see in uploads we have first John Doe and then we have Jendo. Perfect. So everything is working. And for the delete, that's in the avatar. I don't think I tested that. Remember, if we already have an existing image or avatar, we should be able to delete that first before we upload a new one, right? So let's try and then upload a new avatar for Jendo. Remember, there's a current avatar. Let's try and then upload a new one. So I'm going to select this and then upload that. Let's see what happens. Come back to our files, and as you can see, we have this as a new avatar, and the old one or the previous one has been deleted. So everything is working exactly as expected. Okay, so now we are completely done with the user. Okay, so the next thing is to move on to our posts. We should create a model and have controllers and also routes for our posts. I'm first going to create all the controllers. And the first one is going to be create post, the sync function, of course, request response, and maybe next year. And I'm just going to say create post. Okay, now let me have some comments just like we had for the user. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate this for the other controllers. The second one is going to be get posts. We should be able to get all the posts that we have. Get all posts. The next is going to be get single post. So posts and then the ID of the post. There's going to be unprotected as well. So get post singular and get single post. The next one is going to be to get posts that belongs to a particular category. Of course, here should be get. This should be get as well. And the path is going to be large categories and then the category. Right. Now the next one is to get posts by the author. Get author or get user posts. There's going to be a get requests as well. And here is going to be posts users / the user ID. This is actually going to be unprotected, same as this. It's going to be a GET request, and you're going to say get user posts. Now we should have a date post. It's going to be patch, and then the ID of the post is going to be protected, of course. A date post, a date post, and the last one is going to be delete post. So delete post, the method is going to be delete. It's going to be protected, and it's going to have the same part, right? And that's it. Okay, so let's come to our routes, our post routes, and then have these routes. Now remember, in the index.js we already have API posts. Okay, so once we hit this route, it takes us to our routes in here, right here, post route, and then we can continue. Okay, so in here, of course, let's bring in the controllers that we just created. I'm going to bring in the controllers that we just created. Of course, we should export them. Of course, we should export our controllers. We have removed posts. I think that's all right. So I can just copy this, come back here, and then paste this. Coming from, let's go into our controllers and then post controllers. All right. Let's see what's from const. We first should be able to create a post. So yeah, the route is going to be slash, and the method is going to be post, of course, and that's going to first have the middleware. But for now, I'm going to ignore the middleware and then add the controller. I'm going to duplicate this a few times. We are going to have get to get posts, plural. We have another get request to get a single post, but we are going to need the ID of the post, of course. We are going to have a patch request to edit a post, and of course we need the post ID as well. We are going to need a get request to get posts that belongs to a particular category. Now we have to fetch posts by the user or the creator of the post, and of course we need users and then the ID of the user. Get user posts, and I think that's all right. Now we have to be able to delete a post as well. Let me actually bring this here. You have a delete, and we only need the ID of the post we are trying to delete, and the controller is going to be delete post, and I didn't pass that in. Make sure that is brought in. Perfect. So now our routes should be working. So let's come back to Postman, and I should save this. There's going to be what? Edit user details. I'm going to save that and actually close all of these. So we Control W, I'm going to close all of these. Okay, and perhaps I can rename this to users. I'm going to go ahead and create a new collection. I'm going to call this posts. And our first route, let's see, is going to be a post request. Let's bring in base URI posts, and then yeah, that's it. We have the post request already. And let's see. Oh, you know what? I can actually have we already have the auth middleware, right? So I can bring that in already. So let's require go into our middleware, auth middleware. Perfect. So for create post, of course, we are going to need to be logged in before we can create a post. What else? For edit post, of course, we need to be able to be logged in first before we can edit, and also for delete auth middleware. Okay, so now let's come back here and let's try and then test this route. Let's hit it and we get unauthorized. Of course, we are not logged in, so I have to log in as one of the registered users, and that's John123. Let's log in, get the token, come back here and bearer token, pass that in, and then send the request again. Okay, and then we get create post. We hit the controller, the create post controller. Okay, now the next, let me actually save this route. There is going to be create post, and that should be the posts. Now the next one is going to be get all posts, so we should be able to get all the posts, and we don't need to be logged in to do this, so that should work. We get all posts. I'm going to save that as well. The next is going to be get a single post, and then an ID of a post, right? So let's just pass a sign, and then we get single post. Let's save this as well. I'm going to rename this get post. I want it to be camel paste. And now what else? Let's see. You have to be able to get posts by category as well. Posts, categories, and then a category. For now, we don't have any category. So yeah, we have that as well. Get posts by cat. Oh, cat is good. Cat is okay. We have to get posts by author or user as well. Posts. For now, let's just use a random ID. I'm going to save this as well. And the last two are going to be edit and delete. Okay, so for edit is going to be patch and base URI. And for that also we have to be logged in. Okay, so unauthorized because we don't have any token. So let's see. I think I have the token in my memory already, so I'm just going to paste it. And now we have it. Okay, let me save it quickly. And the last route is going to be the delete post. I should be able to delete a post. And then the ID of that post we want to delete. Of course, this also requires a token, and we get a delete. Okay, so all the routes are working. And before we can work in the controller, we should have a model for our posts. Okay, so let's create a post model.js, and let's bring in schema and model from mongoose. Right, and we can go ahead and then create our schema, new schema, and then pass in the objects. Right, so first of all, we need a title for every post, which is going to be a type of string and required. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this a few times. So we need a title, a category, which is going to be a string, but instead of the required, we are going to remove that and have enum. Okay, now here we are going to have an array of the categories we want our users to write articles about or to blog about. Agriculture is going to be number 1, business. In case they don't choose any of these categories, we are going to have a message, which is the value they entered. Value, which is the value they entered, is not supported. It should come into the quotes. Okay, so we will just say the value they entered. So value is not supported. So in case they choose a category somehow that isn't supported or that isn't in this array, that's the message they are going to get. Okay, so we have title, category, we need description or the body of the blog or the post. We need a thumbnail. It's going to be a string and it's going to be required. And lastly, we need creator of the post. And this is going to have a type of schema types, object ID, and a reference of user, the model, the user model. Okay, now one thing, I'm going to have timestamps set to true so that we have created ads and updated ads for each post that we create in our database. Okay, now let's make sure this is exported. We create our model. We are going to call it post and have the schema in here. Okay, now I'm going to bring in some things in our controllers before we even start. Let's bring in our post model that we just created. Let's go into our models and post model. Let's bring in the user model as well. We are going to make use of it. Let's bring in path. Let's bring in file system, Uuid. So const v4. I'm going to change the name to Uuid. And I'm going to require that from Uuid. I'm going to bring in our error model as well. So this should be very fast, and of course we are going to have this in a try catch, and in case we have any problem, we are just going to return next and then new HTTP error, passing the error. Okay, now first thing first, we need the title coming from the request body, the category as well, the description, and we should make sure they are not empty. So title, category, description, and request files. We should make sure none of them are empty, and if they are, then we should return next, new HTTP error, and say fill in all fields and choose thumbnail. You can't create a post without a thumbnail, right? But if we pass, if everything was entered, then we can go ahead and then get a thumbnail from our request files. And let's go ahead and then check the file size. So if thumbnail dot size is greater than 2 megabytes, that's going to be 2 million bytes. If it is greater than 2 megabytes, then we're going to return next new HTTP error and say thumbnail too big should be less than 2 megabytes. Okay, but if it is less than 2 megabytes, then we can go ahead and let file name be equal to thumbnail.name, file name be equal to the file name that we have dot split, and we're going to split by the dot. Okay, so once we split it, let's have a new file name which is going to be the splitted file name. We're going to have a Uuid to give us some unique characters. We're going to have our dots and then the extension, which is going to be the splitted file name, the length -1, which is always going to give us the extension. So once we have that, we should go ahead and then upload the thumbnail. Okay, so thumbnail.mv, their name, we go up one level into our uploads, and then we add the file name, the new file name. Okay, now this is going to take a callback function as we saw during the avatar, and this should be a sync. Okay, we are going to have an await inside, so this should be a sync, passing the error, and in case of any error, then we are going to return next new HTTP error and pass in that error. Okay, if not, then we are going to go ahead. Let me actually have an else here. So else we are going to go ahead and create this new post. So let's await post.create. Title is going to be title, category is going to be category, description is going to be description, a thumbnail is going to be the new file name, and lastly the creator is going to be request.user.id. If you can remember, we get this request user from the authorization middleware. Now if the post wasn't created, that's if we encountered any problem, then let's return next new HTTP error, right, 422 for the status, and yeah, that's it. Okay, so of course once we create a post, we should increase the post count for the user, that particular user that created that post, right? So let's find user and increase post count by 1. So const current user is going to be equal to await user.find by id request user.id, and once we have that user, we can go ahead and user post count is going to be equal to the current user dot posts plus 1. So we get the current user, we increase the post by 1, and then we send it back to the database. Okay, so let's await user dot find by id and update request dot user dot id, and the post is going to be the user post count, right? So we save this, and for the response we are going to return a status of 201, because a new resource has been created. And let's have the new post. Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and then test this out real quick. So we should be able to create a new post. Of course, for us to do that, we should be logged in. And you know what? Let me just close all these. Too much tabs open. Let me first log in as johndoe@gmail.com. The password is going to be john123. Let's log in, get the token, copy that token as our bearer token, and let's create our post. So to create the post, let's go to body, and we should have a title for our post. We should have a category, and for now I'm going to enter a category that isn't in our array. Okay, remember, inside the post model, the category should match any of the elements in the array here. Okay, now this doesn't match any of that, so let's see what happens. We need a description, or the body. I call it a description, but you can name it body if you want. And lastly, we need a thumbnail, right? Of course, we can change this to file and then upload a thumbnail. I'm going to use thumbnail 1. Okay, now let's send this and see what happens. And let's see. Okay, as you can see, we get this is not a valid enum value for the path category. Okay, so we should make sure we enter a category that is in the array. Okay, I'm going to have education, and now let's try this and see what happens. Okay, we have another error. Of course, I'm going to restart the server. Okay, and also make sure we have the authorization token as well. So I'm going to paste the token and then send this, and now we have our first post. Okay, and as you can see, the creator is John Doe. Let's check whether this ID matches John Doe's ID. So the last is BC0A. Let's come to our database, and if I refresh there, you should see that since we have a post model now, we should have a post collection as well in our database. Okay, so let me refresh this, and right here you can see we have it. Okay, so we have the posts. There's the ID of the post, and the ID of the creator is this, or ends with BC0A. Let's check, and that should be John Doe's ID right here. Okay, and the post count right here in the users, the post count of John Doe is now 1. So John Doe now has 1 post. And as you can see, for the post we have the title, the category, description, but we do not have the thumbnail for some reason. There's no thumbnail. Well, let me check whether the thumbnail was uploaded. Yeah, and it was. Okay, the thumbnail, I clicked the send twice, so that's why the thumbnail has been uploaded twice, but for some reason we don't have it. Okay, I'm going to make sure we correct that before we proceed. Okay, I don't have thumbnail here in the models. Okay, so we should yeah, this should be thumbnail. My bad. All right, so now actually I'm going to go ahead and delete the thumbnails that we've already uploaded and delete the other two. and I'm going to delete these two posts and also change the post count for this user. I'm going to change that to 0. Okay, now let's start afresh. Oh, come on. All right, so now we should try that again. We have everything here. I'm actually going to change the post thumbnail. I'm going to use block 2, and yeah, let's send this. Okay, so we have a post. As you can see now, we have the thumbnail. It should be uploaded, and it showed right here, and it should be in the so let's go to posts, and it should be added in the database as well right here. Okay, so now everything is working exactly as it should. Let's actually create another post. So now the post count should be 1 here. We don't have any post for Jane Doe, so I'm going to log in as Jane Doe. So jane@gmail.com. Jane123 is the password. Login. I'm going to copy this token, come here by Jane. That's my title. For the category, I can choose art, and description. This is the body of Jane Doe's first post. And for the thumbnail, I'm going to choose block 20. All right, so let's send this. Of course, the authorization token should be Jane Doe's token, right? So now let's hit this, and now the ID of the creator should be Jane Doe's ID, which is 9903. If we come back and then check the users, you can see that Jane Doe's ID is 9903. But if we come here, we should have a new post by Jane Doe right here. So the category is art, and the title, everything is working exactly as expected. If we come back to the users, Jane Doe's post count should be 1 now. And if we check our uploads, we should have the thumbnail. So everything is working amazingly as planned and as coded. So now we can move on to the next controller, which is going to be get posts. And this is going to be very easy. Let's have everything inside the try catch, and of course here we are going to return posts is going to be equal to await post.find, and that's all we need. Okay, but I actually want to sort it by the most recent post. Okay, I want the most recent posts first, so we are going to sort it using the updated at. Now once we get the post, let's send that as the response back to the user or back to the client. Okay, so this is all we need for get posts. Now let's go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to close this, and we don't need to sign in to test this, so let's just go ahead and fetch the posts. And as you can see, we have the 2 posts that we've created right here. Right, so we have the recent one first, as you can see here in the, it should be updated at, and that's why we should have the recent one first. Remember, there's the second post that we created, so using the sort that we have here, we should have the recent one, which is this one, should come first before the second one. So I made a mistake here. It should have been updated at, and let's go ahead and send this again right here. So we have Jane Doe's post first. Okay, that's it for get all posts. Now let's move on to get single post. Let's have our try catch. I'm going to remove this. First, we need to get the post ID, and that should be coming from the request params. And we are going to fetch that post by ID. We are going to find by ID. We can just send it as a response back to our client. Okay, but if we don't get it, then we should return next new HTTP error and say post not found. Right, but if we get it, of course, as I said, we are just going to send it to the client. Okay, so that's it. So let's go ahead and then try and fetch one of these posts. I'm going to copy this. So that's going to be the ID we send, and now we have that. Okay, if I come back here, copy this ID, we should be able to fetch that. Right, and if the ID doesn't exist, we should have the error message. And you can, of course, you can be specific. Okay, you can go on and be specific here to have a meaningful message, but I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay, now let's move on to the next controller. Let's have our try catch, and we are going to extract the category from the request params. And once we have it, let's find that, or let's fetch that from the database. Let's await post or find, and then pass in the category. Of course, here too, I'm going to sort it to have the most recent posts first, but I'm going to sort this one by the created at. Right, if you want, you can use updated at. And once we have this, we can just send it to the client. The status is going to be 200 cat posts. All right, we save this, come back to Postman, and we are going to fetch post by category. And let's try and fetch by a category that doesn't exist, and we get an empty array. All right, so I think one of the categories we've created a post, or we've assigned a post to, is education. And yeah, so we have John Doe's post, and that was yeah, that was it. Okay, that's the post and the other post is what at, yeah, so that's John Doe's post. Let's try and then fetch that as well. So if we fetch, we get this. Okay, and I hope that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and let's fetch the users or the author posts. Let's have our try catch, return next new HTTP error. Let's get the ID of the user whose posts we are trying to fetch. Post.find, and the creator is going to be the ID that we got. Okay, now here too, I'm going to sort by created at -1. Okay, so once we get that, we are going to send that to the client. And yep, that's it. Okay, so let's come here, and I'm going to copy the ID of this person, and that's Jendo. Come here. If you try to fetch a user that doesn't exist, or the post of a user that doesn't exist, we get this, which is an error. But if we have a real user, let's try and fetch, and then we get this. Okay, So far we have only one post by Jendo. If we go ahead and then create a post for Jendo, let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to real quick have a title, a thumbnail. I should change this to file, and I select a thumbnail for this post. I'm going to use this. Let's see. I'll use this picture, and that's it. Okay, so actually the description. Okay, so this should be, I made a mistake here. The title should be here instead, the body. Right, so let's go ahead and then create this post. So now we have two posts for Jendo, right? So when we come back here and then try to fetch post by Jendo, we should get two. Let's see what is happening. Let's check the database and see. We should have two posts by Jendo, right? We have it. So what's wrong? Okay, is this okay? So this Jendo's ID. If I copy that, come here and then paste it, let's fetch again and see what happens. And for some reason I'm only getting the first post. That shouldn't be. So interesting. Okay, I probably didn't. Let's check the database real quick. Okay, so right, so I was logged in as John Doe before during the creation. Okay, when I created this very recent post, where is it? Right here, this very recent post that I created, I was signed in as John Doe. Okay, I've been signed in as John Doe already, and I did not log out. Okay, so when we check the creator ID for this post, this is John Doe's ID. Okay, so now if you come back and then try to fetch the post by the user, and this is John Doe's ID, right? If I try to fetch, I'm going to get two posts by John Doe. This is actually working, but I just forgot to sign in as Jane Doe, right? And I hope that makes sense. So we can now proceed to the next controller, and that's going to be edit post. Let's have our try catch. And here I'm going to have some variables. And we can go ahead and get the ID of the post you are trying to edit. Okay, so I'm going to call this post ID, which will be coming from the request params. Now let's get the new title, category, and description of the post that is coming in. So, and then description, and that's going to be coming from the request body. And I'm going to make sure we don't get any empty fields. Okay, so the category shouldn't be empty. And lastly, the description. And actually for the description, I'm going to check the length. Okay, since we are using React Query for the description, that's the body in React. Okay, remember, if you watch the front-end video, remember you used React Query, and it usually comes with some elements already, you know, with some empty paragraph tags and all that. Okay, and some break tags as well. So depending on the height that you give it, you may want to check the amount or the number of elements in it before you can decide if, or before you can make the check to see if that field is empty or not. Okay, so for my styling, I have to check the length and see if it is less than 12 characters. If so, then that means that field is empty. right? And I'm going to return next new HTTP error. Right, let me have a comment here. So once that is done, we can go ahead, and what I want to do is to be able to update a post without changing the thumbnail. For now, I'm going to check if we have a thumbnail selected. Okay, so if we have any file in the request. If so, or actually, I'm going to check if we don't have any file in the request. If so, then we can go ahead and then just update the post. That's using the category, the title, and the description alone. Okay, so updated post is now going to be await post.find by ID and update, and we are going to use the post ID and pass in the title, category, and the description, and set it to true so that we get a newly updated post. Right, else, that's if we have a file in the request, then that means we should take care of the previous thumbnail in the system that's in the database. We should delete that and then replace it with the new thumbnail coming in. Okay, we should upload the new thumbnail and then send that name, the file name, to the database. Okay, so we have to get the post, we have to get old post from database before we can proceed with this. So const old post is going to be equal to await post dot find by ID, and we are going to pass in the post ID. Right, now once we have that, let's go ahead and delete the old thumbnail. Okay, so file system on link, we have path already, so path dot join their name. Let's go into uploads, that's one step above, and into the uploads folder, and add the name of the thumbnail, that's the old thumbnail. We are going to have an asynchronous callback function here, and let's make sure we have no error. So if there's an error, then we are not going to proceed, right? We're going to return next, and pass in the error. But if there is no error, then we can go ahead and upload a new thumbnail. Alright, so const, let's get the thumbnail from the request files. And of course, let's check the file size here as well. So if thumbnail, come on, the size is greater than 2 megabytes, that's 2 million bytes. Okay, we are going to return an error message and say thumbnail too big, should be less than 2 megabytes. Okay, but if you pass, then we can go ahead and upload that thumbnail. But of course, we have to format the name to make sure we don't have any clashes, just like we did for create post. Okay, so right here, I'm going to have the file name be equal to the thumbnail name, and let's split it. So splitted file name is going to be equal to the file name dot split, and we are splitting by the dots. We've done this twice already. So the new file name is going to be equal to the splitted file name, get the first part of it, and then add the unique characters that we need, that's using Uuid, and add the extension, which is going to be the splitted file name dot length -1. Now that we have a unique name for it, we can go ahead and upload it into our uploads folder. So thumbnail dot move or mv path dot join their name, go into our uploads folder and add the file name, right? And we should have an async callback function here, and make sure we don't have any errors. So first, let's check if we have any errors. If so, then we are going to return next new HTTP error and pass in the error. Now, once we are done with the file upload, we can go ahead and update the new post details that we have. We can update that in our database. Okay, so updated post is going to be equal to await post dot find by ID and update post ID, and then we want to update the title, category, description. The thumbnail is going to be the new file name, and of course we want to set new to be true. Okay, so let's go ahead and then check to make sure. Okay, so I have a problem, guys. All these shouldn't be in here. Okay, so I'm going to format this real quick. Right, so everything here, I'm going to cut it. Okay, it should be outside of this on link. Okay, it should be outside of this block. Okay, so once we have this, let's go ahead and then make sure or check if we were able to actually update the post. And if we weren't able to update it, let's have a new HTTP error. But if we are able to update the post, then we can go ahead and then send that to the client, and that's going to be the updated post. I hope that makes sense, guys. So make sure you didn't make the mistake that I made earlier. So you have to delete the thumbnail and then we will continue. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and then test this out. So let's see. This post right here, this should have been a post by Jendo, but unfortunately we were signed in by John Doe. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to copy the ID of this post and then edit it, right? So edit post right here. First of all, I'm already signed in as John Doe, so let's go to body form data. Let me paste the ID of the post you are trying to edit. So the title, and upload a file. Wait a minute. First of all, let me check the thumbnail for that post. Where is it? Should be okay. So that is blog 2, I think, or blog 26. Let's see. So blog 262f. Let's check that file. Blog 262f. So this should be okay. This right here. So once we are able to update, this should be deleted and replaced with different thumbnail. Okay, so far we have 3 thumbnails, and this is what we are trying to update. So let's go ahead and choose a different thumbnail. I'm going to choose this, and now let's hit send and see what happens. Okay, so it's been updated. Let's check, and okay, we have a problem, and that should be, yeah, I didn't have the dot before the extension, right? So that should be an easy fix. Let's see. Okay, so right after the UUID, we should have a dot and then the extension. Perfect. So let me manually edit this. right? So we actually have it, just that we messed up with the alteration of the name. Of course, as I said, we should be able to update without the thumbnail. Okay, so I can check this out, and I'll say second post by John Doe edited. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to change this to @ and then send. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that's done, and we should be able to keep the previous thumbnail. Now the last controller that we need to work on is going to be the delete. Okay, the delete post controller. Let's have our try catch. Of course, here we need the ID of the post you are trying to delete, and that should be coming from the request params. And let's check to make sure we actually have that post ID. If you don't, then we're going to return an error message. But if you do have the post ID, let's go ahead and then fetch that post from the database, because we want to fetch it, get the thumbnail, and then delete that thumbnail from our files before, that's from our uploads folder, before we can actually delete the post from the database. And then post ID, right? So let me actually have the file name be equal to post thumbnail. Okay, so now let's go ahead and delete thumbnail from uploads folder, and we're going to use the onLink path.join their name. Let's go up one level into our uploads folder and add the file name. Right, let's have an async function here and pass in the error in case there are any errors. And if there is any error, then we are going to return next new http error and pass in the error. Else, that's if everything went well, then we can proceed to delete this post from the database. So find by ID and delete, and pass in the post ID. Right, perfect. Now once we delete a post, we should decrease the post count of the user or the creator associated with this post. Okay, so I'm going to find user and reduce post count by 1, and that's going to be the current user. We are going to find that user by ID, and that's going to be request user ID. We find the user, and the user post count is going to be posts minus 1. Right, now we are going to await user.find by ID and update, because we are going to update the post count of that user. Let's pass in the ID of that user first, and we are going to update the posts, which is the post count. Right, so when that is done, we can return a JSON and say perfect. So let's go ahead and then try to delete some posts, and I'm just going to copy this. I don't have a delete route, so I'm going to create that real quick. Let me actually close all these and create a new route for delete. The method is going to be delete, of course, base URI post and the ID of that post, right? And let me save this real quick. So now I should paste the ID of the post that I'm trying to delete, and actually let me fetch every post. Yep, FB and Let me delete this one instead. And this is the first post, and that is by John Doe. This is the ID of John Doe. So let's go ahead and then delete that post. So let's see what happens. Unauthorized, we are not logged in, so that's not going to work. Let's go ahead and then log in. Let's go ahead. We are logged in. I can copy the token, and for the authorization bearer token, we're going to paste the token in. So now we are trying to delete this post. Let's go ahead and try again, and now post with this ID deleted successfully. Okay, if you can see here, there is no thumbnail, and that's because I've been able to delete all the posts using John Doe as a login, okay, or being logged in as John Doe. And that shouldn't be possible because John Doe shouldn't be able to delete Jane Doe's posts. It shouldn't happen, right? So let's get back into our controller. So before we do any deletion, that's before we delete the thumbnail, we have to check first to make sure the current logged in user, that is from the Auth Middleware, is the creator of that post. And once we have that, we can go ahead and delete the thumbnail, and then go ahead and delete the post itself from the database. Okay, but if that user is not the current logged in user, then we are going to have a problem. You are going to have an error, right? So that's it. Make sure you have this, and also even in the edit post, you should have that as well. So right here, you should make sure the current logged in user is the creator of that post, and wrap that around everything in here. Okay, so once you have that, everything should be set and you are good to go. So it should be in the delete and the edit post controllers. Now let's go ahead and test everything out. And as you can see in our uploads folder, we only have the avatar for Jane Doe and John Doe. And in our database, we have no posts. Okay, if we check our users collection as well, the posts count are 00. Okay, so let's go ahead, create a brand new user, and then create some posts as well. So let's register a user. A user needs a name, an email, password, and a confirmed password, which is password 2, if you can remember. And the name is going to be Ernest Achiever, and I spelled Achiever wrong. Email achiever@gmail.com. Password achiever123, and confirm password is achiever123. But let's intentionally make a mistake here and try and register. Let's see what happens. Passwords do not match, of course. Let's try and then register an existing user. So in this case, john@gmail.com exists. We get email already exists. Okay, so everything is working, and now that we have everything correct, let's register this user. We get Achiever registered. Okay, so let's log in as Achiever. To log in, we need an email and a password. The email is achiever@gmail.com, and the password is achiever123. Let's log in. And invalid credentials. Did I spell anything wrong? Achiever@gmail.com, achiever123. Let's see. Let's sign in again, and now we have our token. Okay, so now we can go ahead and create a new post. And to create a post, we need a title, we need a category, we need a description, that's the body of the post, and a thumbnail. So for the title, by Achiever. Category, I'm going to do entertainment. Description, And lastly, the thumbnail is going to be our file. Let's upload a thumbnail here, and I'm going to use this image, and let's unauthorized because I didn't pass in the bearer token. I'll just paste it, and now we should have our post. Okay, so let's check to see, and we have the thumbnail right here. Let's check our database real quick, and now we have a post. Perfect. Okay, so if you try to fetch all posts, let's see what happens. Get all posts. Let's send that request, and we have that. And let's quickly go ahead and create another post. Okay, so let me create another post for the body. I'm just going to change this is the second post, and you know what, I'm going to keep the old thumbnail. Okay, and you're going to notice that although they had the same name originally, they are going to be authored before they get stored in our database and also get saved in our server, in our uploads folder. Okay, so let's go ahead and then create this, and that should work. Now if we get all posts, we should have 2 posts so far, and you can see that the thumbnails are different. Okay, the name for the thumbnails are different, right? Which is perfect. Now let's go ahead and log in as one of the earlier logged in users, one of the earlier registered users. So this is going to be John 123. Let's sign in, and let's try and then delete the post that we just created. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to delete a post that was created by an achiever, but with John Doe's token. Okay, so this shouldn't work. Let's see what happens. And we need the ID of the post you are trying to delete. Okay, so let me copy an ID here and come back to delete post, paste that ID, and let's see what happens. Post couldn't be deleted. Perfect. Okay, so, and I don't know if I showed you this. That's for the delete post. Make sure this response is in here. Okay, it shouldn't come down here, it should be in here. Right, perfect. So that wouldn't work unless we are logged in as the creator of that post. So in this case, that's going to be an achiever or achiever123 for the password. The email is achiever@gmail.com. We copy achiever's token, come back to delete, and now the token is going to be the actual creator of that post. So now we send this request, and the post has been deleted. So now if we fetch all posts, we should have only 1 post. Okay, if that makes sense. And for the edit, let's try and then edit this post. So now for the thumbnail, I'm going to change to this, and actually I'm going to change this to agriculture to match it. All right, so now I'm going to log in as a different user again. So this is going to be John Doe, just to make sure we have everything working perfectly. Okay, so the authorization bearer token is going to be John Doe, who is not the creator, so they shouldn't work. Let's try and then send this, and we have an error. Okay, we have an error here. Agriculture. Okay, so what's the error about? Oh, of course, we should pass in the actual ID of 4 years of the post. So edit, let's pass in the ID and send this request. Couldn't update post. Okay, so there's the check that we had. This is the last check we had for the edit post. You should make sure the creator of the post is the one trying to update that post, right? So now let's log back in as the original creator. That's Achiever. Achiever 123 is the password. Let's log in. Copy this, come back, and the authorization token. Oh, come on. I did Control C instead of Control V. Let me copy this again. Come back and then paste it. Right. So now this should be edited to the new form that we sent. Okay. And now you can see that the thumbnail is also updated. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we are going to connect our React application to this API that we just created.